To any hockey fan, the Anthony Stolarz injury brought back some haunting memories. Sidney Crosby, James Reimer, Eric Lindros, and even Stolarz's own assistant coach Mark Savard. They're all victims of hits that, at least by league standards, were hockey plays. Sam Bennett was not penalized on this play, nor did he receive supplemental discipline, suggesting the NHL felt this way again. I'm not here to debate the rules or dive into Bennett's history. Just want to look at this from a biomechanical perspective to try to understand what likely happened to Anthony Stolarz's brain during this game. I'll also aim to not make any bold claims other than using scientific literature to understand this event. I'm going to use similar events that have been studied, but I'm limited to what is available. I'm also not a doctor, nor would I call myself an expert on this matter, but I've studied biomechanics of brain trauma for a decent amount of time, through which I've obtained undergrad, master's degrees, and now I'm pursuing a PhD. So I'm simply going to use scientific evidence to understand this. We'll start with the first moment that's been pointed to, being the Sam Reinhart shot in the first period that hit Stolarz in the mask. A puck, while fast, is light, and it hits for a split second. This is not the kind of high mass or whipping-like motion that tends to cause concussive injury, as it's a low mass, low duration event. But a shot this hard, which is 82 miles an hour, or approximately 36.7 meters per second according to the broadcast, could induce similar brain strain to the biomechanical thresholds associated with diagnosed concussion. I'm going to use maximum principal strain, or MPS, as it's a measure that I'm familiar with, but I do encourage future discussion with those having other backgrounds. Dr. Michio Clark, Dr. Blaine Hoshizaki, and Dr. Michael D. Gilchrist studied head impacts on a goaltender similar to the one that Stolarz sustained back in 2020. They explored a head impact on a goaltender from a shot clocked at just over 80 miles per hour, or 35.8 meters per second, and this was to the cage on the mask, almost the exact same spot as Reinhart's shot to Stolarz. They found that the MPS associated was below the lower boundary that has been associated with diagnosed concussions in the past, and even one standard deviation had it below the threshold. Now, Reinhardt's shot was slightly above this velocity, as again, it was clocked at 36.7 miles per hour, so we could expect a slightly higher MPS. But based on this, I believe that it's possible that this shot could have at least factored into Stolarz presenting with symptoms later, as it was not far off the injury threshold. But in my opinion, it's not what caused his injury, and he would not have been removed from the game if not for the collision with Sam Bennett. As Bennett cuts through the crease, his glove catches Stolarz in the head, around the ear area. This is what we would call the side center of gravity position. This contact causes Stolarz's head to twist. This is rotational motion and is the kind of movement that can shear brain tissue. Now, why is this a problem? Because the brain is a low shear modulus, meaning it doesn't handle twisting very well. This shearing is what causes mild traumatic brain injury or concussion. Using video analysis software called Canovia, I estimated the velocity of the impact to be around 4 meters per second. Now, based on the same study as before, a player to goalie collision at about 5.2 meters per second through the center of gravity of the head can produce an MPS of about 20%, which is above the same established threshold as mentioned before. And even including the standard deviation of this, has it right around the threshold of about 16 to 17% MPS. At this level of strain, some players won't show symptoms, but others will. Stolarz didn't initially, beyond his immediate reaction to contact, and was even shown laughing with Joseph Woll initially. What's interesting is that Stolarz kept playing after the hit for about 10 more minutes. Playing likely exacerbated his condition, which could explain why he eventually vomited on the bench, a likely sign of brain trauma. Another thing to note is that most studies on head impacts are done on players and not goalies, which is why I was only able to reference this one study. Goalie helmets are different though. When Bennett's helmet hit Stolarz, it caught onto the flat face in the side of his helmet, which drags it and causes an extended rotation. While we try to account for this when testing in labs, it's impossible to perfectly replicate the active muscular response. This longer contact likely caused more head twist than in a typical player collision, and if Stolarz's chin was locked into the chin guard like most goalies have, his neck would have likely absorbed even more torque and increased the rotation of his head beyond that was demonstrated in the study. I strongly believe that this hit caused a concussive injury, even if it looked minor in real time. I want to be clear that both examples I used are not exact estimates, but are based on the convenience of what was available, and not much research has been done on goalie head impacts. If anyone has a study that better replicates either event, please let me know. I'll quickly break down what maximum principal strain or MPS is. In this case, I used peak MPS, which is the highest tensile strain to the 3 axes of brain tissue. It's measured as a percentage of the initial tissue length and is calculated in 3 steps: video analysis, lab reconstructions, and finite element modeling. Video analysis is finding the hit, measuring the speed, and understanding the parameters such as location and compliance. Lab reconstructions involve replicating the hit using a helmeted dummy, accelerometers, and a controlled impacting device. And finite element modeling uses the accelerometer data found in lab reconstructions and a finite element model to simulate brain tissue response, which calculates strain. This is how researchers are predicting brain strain without actually scanning a live brain post-injury. Of course, there's uncertainty to be considered using such variables, and in a perfect world, we'd be able to see everyone's brain in real time and understand what is happening to them following any head impact. But unfortunately, this is just not the case. Injury biomechanics can help to understand the body's physical response and the likely outcomes, but obviously we need to treat the symptoms as they occur, which is what happened with Anthony Stolarz. At the end of the day, concussions are diagnosed based on symptoms. This makes them hard to catch and even harder to prevent. But the NHL does have access to body tracking and player motion data. In my opinion, it's time to push for systems that use this data to flag high-risk head impacts in real time, so players like Stolarz can be removed and monitored before symptoms become too severe. I've linked some relevant papers and resources in the description that are working to address this problem. Let me know your thoughts in the comments, and if you'd like more injury breakdowns, let me know.